will not be confined to the theme, rather
Yes, I believe sir has lost his connection. So, in this regard, Atul sir, are you there? Yeah, sir has joined, I believe. Arya?
Can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, Atul sir is in the meet, but he's, I guess, there's some.
Please try to connect him. Do you have the phone number? You please call.
Yes, please.
Hi, sir.
Prem sir, till then, can you please start?
Now tell me if I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Okay. Thank you. There is some internet related issue at my place, so I'm very sorry about it. So I was telling you that we have actually varied area that we have to cover in this session, ranging from global governance, then liberalization, privatization. Then there is a paper about globalization, farming and land grab. There is a paper about cooperative federalism and this recent pandemic through which we are going. And then governance in outer space, separation of powers. Somebody has talked about homosexuality also, then wheel and genes also. So you will find that there are varied type of discussion that we can hope in this session. And then there are, discussions regarding to financial institutions and distributive justice. And but as you know that we are limited by time. So if Dr. Premchand allows me, then I think we should give 10 minutes, roughly 10 to 15 minutes time for every presentation.
Sir, as there are 11 presenters and we have only 80 minutes. So in this case, see participants, we welcome you all on behalf of RMNLU and the organizing committee, and on behalf of my colleague, chairperson, Professor Tiwari. We should be very clear that wherever we found the chairperson and me, if we found that it is a compilation of information, nothing substantial is coming from, so we can ask you directly come to your own suggestions or on your findings. Bear with us because we have limited time and we have to complete all the presentations, and we have to give the time to each and every presenters because there are 11. So if even we allow to speak for 10 minutes and 10 minutes, I believe it will be over by the starting point. So it will be 80 minutes we do have in our hand. So in this regard, 7 to 10 minutes maximum, if sir agree with me, 7 to 10 minutes. So minimum 7, maximum 10, and it will be your self, regulatory kind of thing. Whenever you are thinking that time is going to over, you have to cut short of your discussion. And see, we do have the papers, or you will share the final papers with us. We will look into those parts as well. So participants, welcome again. And Arya and Sachika, both of you are to assist the coordination of this technical session. So can I note it down who is present right now? This is Aman Samira Khan. Are you there? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Deepti Singh. Deepti is there? Deepti Singh. Okay. Dinesh Kumar. Dinesh, are you there, please?
Yes.
Dinesh is there. Right. Muhammad Yasin. And yes, great. Namit Kumar Srivastava. Namit is there?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, right. Aishwarya Singh. Aishwarya is there.
Present,
Right.
sir.
Soumya Ranjan. Soumya? No. Okay. Rishika Jain. Priyal Jain. Yeah, Priyal is there.
Yes.
Swati Singh Parmar.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, right. And Prateek Tripathi, Akanksha Pathak.
Yes, sir. Present, sir.
Right. And Professor Dr. Saroj.
Yes, sir.
Right. So, with the permission of chair, if we can start, Professor Tiwari.
Yeah, please. So we will. What we'll expect from you is, because the organizers have circulated the list wherein your designation, which institution you represent, is not mentioned. So it would be in the fitness of thing that if you start with introducing yourself. Okay, so Dr. Premchand, I would request you to assist me in doing this, calling the name and keeping the time, please.
Right. And keeping the time, Sachika and Arya is there. They will assist us. Second point is, when you are presenting, we believe that we can see you, that who is presenting and who were the presenters. So we request you to all to open your camera or video.
Prem sir,
Yeah.
if you could just excuse me, we have Adil sir, who will be the rapporteur here. So he'll be moderating the whole session for you. So Adil sir will be doing all of that.
Right.
So like you three can stay in sync, and then we can have like a sync session.
Okay, you can keep the time, right? Record the time.
Yes. Adil sir will be taking into account the time as well.
Right. Adil Ansari.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
So, Professor
And
Tiwari,
Dr. Premchand and two others, let me have few words about Muhammad Adil Ansari. He has been our student in LLB, and he is an international player. He has a lot of interest and has won many events in bodybuilding, powerlifting, and judo also. So he's a wonderful international player with wonderful achievements in the field of legal education as well. So welcome Adil to you on this forum. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Go
sir.
ahead, Adil.
It's actually wonderful to meet Dr. Prem sir, and of course you have been my faculty in my LLB, and I've always looked up to you. I welcome you all. I welcome all the participants. It's a lovely sunny day. And of course, we have a list of participants, which I believe have a quite some good work under their grasp, because we have some amazing topics in front of us. Our topic for today, which is universalism and global governance. Now, a panelist, Dr. Prem sir, he is a faculty at NLU Delhi. Atul Kumar sir, again, I'm going to call them as such because again, they are my esteemed teachers and I'm yet learning from them. So we have an esteemed panelists in front of us. They are well versed in their fields. They are legends in their fields. So all the participants just gear up. You'll be presenting your papers. You'll be allotted around 5 to 8 minutes. But again, Dr. Prem sir, he has asked or requested that you'll be allotted around 10 to 15 minutes. But again, that would be given to you only your presentation is well worth it. So, okay.
7 to 10 minutes.
7 to 10 minutes.
7, 10 maximum. And when you will be at 10, we will stop you at that very moment. We have to justify, justify with each and every present.
So participants, try to understand that if you have to get, if you want to have those extra 3 minutes, you have to earn it. Okay, we are going to stop you at 7. Those 3 minutes, it would be completely upon what you're going to present. Okay, so without wasting much of your time, I would like to. May I call upon our first participant, sir?
Yes,
sir.
Yes.
Permission.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, we have with us Aman Shah and Samira. The title of the paper, India, Globalization and Global Governance, a study about India's race for international recognition in the realm of global governance. Wow, that's quite a big topic. Anyhow, I welcome both the participants. The chair is open for you. Come on and just present your paper.
Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Sir, I would like to share my screen for the PowerPoint presentation.
Sure.
If that's allowed. I think the screen sharing is disabled.
Sachika, make him presenter.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I guess you would have the power to share your screen now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aman Alisha, and I'm a practicing advocate by profession. I have completed my law degree from Aligarh Muslim University. And my paper deals with a holistic approach towards global governance. And as pointed out by Adil sir, it is a big topic because it encompasses the history of global governance. It goes through the role that India has played from the beginning of the 90s era and to the present scenario. Now, first of all, we have to understand the concept of global governance. Now, global governance is a continuous process that transcends national boundaries to provide action for public good. This is done through a purposeful order of international organizations like United Nations, WHO, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, International Court of Justice, and mechanisms and policies for global cooperation. Now, India has been a part of Rising Asia and has established itself as a competent authority to play in the big boys club of global governance. Now, we have to understand the emergence of the concept of global governance. The Treaty of Versailles gave rise to the Second World War. And in context of an international organizations to prevent a world war that happened after the World War I, it was named as League of Nations. Now, League of Nations was formed so that another event like World War I could not happen. But as we all know, that it failed dramatically. And the Treaty of Versailles gave rise to World War II. The end of World War II was, again, a very tough time in the international space. Countries were trying to find ways to find mechanisms for peaceful solutions to problems. And it gave rise to organizations like United Nations. But the failure of United Nations was marked by the beginning of Cold War. The shift was between two powers, that was Russia and United States. That was the concept of balance of power policy, that two countries from two different parts of the world were controlling the global order. And after the decline of the policy of balance of power that marks the end of Cold War, the concept of complex interdependence among countries was founded. Now, coming to India, global governance gained a governmental organization, real momentum after the Cold War, which marked the geostrategic breakdown and a shift from the policy of balance of powers. Various different developing countries like India, Japan, China became big players. And they started questioning the industrialized nations about the international standards and policies, which only benefit their own interests. Now, India became a part of the United Nations well before gaining independence. It was at the forefront during the United Nations' tumultuous years of struggle against colonialism and apartheid. India co-sponsored the landmark 1960 Declaration of the United Nations on granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples, which aimed at ending colonialism in all forms and manifestations, and was also elected the first chair of the Decolonization Committee. India has thus led the concerns of developing countries in the global arena and cemented itself as an essential and integral part of the United Nations. Now, during the Cold War era, India and other developing countries founded the Non-Aligned Movement. The goal of Non-Aligned Movement was to stabilize the world order while maintaining peace and security by peaceful political intervention. However, the creation of USSR attracted India's interests and created confusion among smaller countries. And ultimately, the smaller countries either drifted to US or the USSR. However, when the USSR collapsed, India's new economic policy inclined towards the United States. And this again created a gray area about India's stand on NAM protocols. Nevertheless, if we analyze this change in inclination, we can observe that India avoided its association with the universalism of the weak policy. India understood that the policies of NAM would reduce it to a mere dissident and not a positive contributor. Therefore, while maintaining its neutrality, India made slight changes to its international policies to meet the nation's interests. Now, this is the current status of liberal world order. The liberal world order stands and was founded by United States. The expansion of economic boundaries, trade and commerce practices, different interactions, bilateral agreements. Now, in the beginning of the liberal world order, there were only two powers, United States and Russia. But after the 90s era, the end of Cold War, it paved way for countries from the Asiatic regions. India, China, and Japan became big players. Now, during the post-Second World War, a new liberal world order was made possible by the United States' dominant stance against fascists and communists. Now, India benefited greatly from this new liberal order, but India maintained its reservation against complete westernizations. The decision makers of that time understood that India had to maintain some distance from NAM protocols to serve the nation's interests better. Now, why did India, being the founding members of the NAM, the non-aligned movement, distance itself from the prospects of NAM? Because during the 1962 war with China, nations like Ghana and Egypt took an anti-India stance. And during the wars of 1965 and 1971, nations like Indonesia and Egypt supported Pakistan. This made India lose even more trust in NAM's objectives and forced it to tread the road to global governance alone. The modernization of Indian armed forces and economic reforms of 1991 was not viewed as threatening in nature, unlike Russia and China. However, the unipolar world that US created paved way for new players. That was India and China. The powerhouse of economic growth has now shifted to Asia, and India and China are the biggest contenders. Now, in theory, we can say that this sounds like an outstanding achievement, that India is growing. But in reality, the stakes are high as ever, because the competition is now with a direct neighbor who has always been hostile towards India's growth. Now, how we can say that China has always been hostile towards India's growth? Because China is our neighbor. But to understand this, China's approach towards global governance is not as generous as United States. China's pompous attitudes in the past years towards other nations, the sanctity of global governance would change from what it is now. Now, China has time and again blocked India's entry into the nuclear supply group and the United Nations Security Council. The growing resistance towards the neoliberal order of globalization is not just by developing nations, but by the flag barriers of globalization themselves, like United States neo-mercantilism approach, which believes that the exports of the country should be more rather than their imports, and the United Kingdom's decision to move out of European Union are clear signs that the liberal order is at stake and its future is uncertain. Now, the biggest problem for India is that India has significantly benefited from this liberal order. Even before the coronavirus pandemic, India had been crossroads with its projected economic growth. The 1991 economic reforms have slowed significantly in the past years. With all the path-breaking achievements in the economic sector, a large sum of India's population remains unaffected by such growth and development.
Now, can I stop you over there?
Yeah,
I'm really sorry. I hate doing this, but again, we are short on time. Can you summarize all of that in next 2 minutes? Because you are the first one, so I'll give you that much margin.
Okay.
Can you summarize that?
Okay.
Because then we'll have a chair to put some questions to you as well. Okay.
Definitely.
So you have 2 minutes. Aman, just go for it.
Okay. Now, as we can see that these are the different problems that India is facing with its neighbors. Now, India has to revive NAM protocols. India has to strengthen its ties with its neighbors, and has to ensure regional peace. And ultimately, the role of a country in global arena depends on the domestic infrastructure. If a country is strong and dependent at its domestic level, then only it can be a positive contributor in the global arena. Now, India has always been stuck between its principled past and has not been following the path towards pragmatic future. The pandemic has made digitalization as the new medium of communication and a tool for conducting day-to-day business. India needs to focus its technological advancements. Also, we need to get away from the emotional quest for indigenous production of things. We have to make a strategic improvements. We have to make strategic ties to benefit the larger good to benefit the larger good of the people. And ultimately, I can say that India's global cooperation is going in the right direction. India has been part of the G20, and also India has been part of various informal international organizations like G4, Brazil, Germany, and Japan, the G6, and ASEAN. So, together we can say that domestic infrastructure, economic development, and a seat at the United Nations Security Council has to be established by India. And to confirm a seat at UNSC, India has to maintain its lead in its own region, that is the South Asiatic region, and India has to emerge as a leader of the neighboring countries. Then only it can become a leader in the global space. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Aman. And I would like to invite Dr. Atul sir and Dr. Prem sir. If you'd like to make any comments or ask any questions to our presenters, the floor is all yours. So your mic is off.
Sir, I'm sorry, your mic is off, sir.
My apologies, sir, but your mic has again turned off. Can you just switch it on, please?
Okay. So I was just saying that if somebody from participants have a question, let them ask first.
So participants, now the floor is all yours. So you can put up any questions. You know, Aman is here to answer all the questions which you have. if you want to just put up some offensive questions again, for that also Aman seems to be ready. He has got a good presentation over. Okay, so participants, please.
Okay, it seems that there is no question. So Aman, you talked about how India has shifted its stance from non-aligned movement to trying to become a kind of a permanent member in the Security Council of the UN. But we have seen that India has changed instances in several other aspects. Say, for example, climate change negotiation. Okay. Earlier, India was resistant, was showing resistance in joining the effort of lowering carbon footprint, but now it has yielded. So what do you think is the reason?
Sir, definitely because India wants to be a player in the big boys club. And climate change initiative is a hot topic in the developed countries. So India, in the beginning, as you have already mentioned, was not very sure about participating in the climate change initiatives. But the primary reason that I believe is that India wants to participate in the global space, be it in whatever initiative or policy making that could be, because then only it can influence. Because if we distance ourselves from different initiatives and different actions at a global level, we cannot secure global coordination, and India cannot become important part of the global space. So I believe that to be more in touch with the other developed countries and to influence them, India has been accepting the global protocols of climate change, as we have already seen in the Montreal policies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aman. Prem sir, do you have any questions to Aman?
Not any question, but right now I have one point to say to everyone. Can we have the question answer at the end? So
Indeed, sir.
Please not hear all questions and queries. We will also give the observation on your papers. So because if there will be a question, it may take more time rather than the presentation.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, sir. Because we have already, the first participant always get that advantage of getting the most amount of time. And Aman, you have made it quite amusing for us to understand these concepts. So thank you, Aman. Now I would like to invite our second participant. We have Deepti Singh, and her topic is liberalization, privatization, and globalization in the context of India. Something which is quite a subject of debate in almost every classroom which we have, which deals with law or international relations. So Deepti, the floor is all yours. 7 minutes.
Deepti is not present as Dinesh. We can go for the next.
So Deepti is not here. We have an additional 7 minutes. Thankfully, we are now on track. So the next participant now we have is Dinesh Kumar. His topic, now this is a very interesting topic and something which Dr. Atul sir has taken into consideration. And the topic is globalization, farming and land grab, and exploratory study. So Dinesh, the floor is all yours. You can begin with your presentation.
Hello.
Yes, Dinesh, you are audible. You can begin with your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dinesh Kumar, and my title of paper is Globalization, Farming and Land Grab, and Exploratory Study. So, I want to your permission for share my screen, sir. Hello.
I would request the committee members to please allow Dinesh ji to share his screen, please. Thank you.
Adil sir, I guess everyone has the authority to share their screens.
So Dinesh sir, you will have to figure it out how to share your screen. Okay.
Okay. So globalization has a huge impact on every aspect of individual's life. It has influenced the living of individual from food to attire and culture. Globalization has increased the demand of infrastructure across the world. Developed countries have managed their infrastructure development with many alternatives, but the developing and third world countries have still works for the infrastructure development. Third world countries, especially from South Asia and Latin people, bear the burden of infrastructure development at the cost of their sacrifices in terms of land, labor, and other valuable resources.
Yeah, Dinesh, please continue.
Some technical problems, sorry for that.
Dinesh, are you a little bit nervous? You don't have to be. You can simply jump to the point. It's completely fine.
Sorry, sir. Due to technical problem, I am unable to present my paper.
It's completely fine. You can, because we are short on time, you can, elaborate your perspective through your views as well. Okay.
Adil sir, in case Dinesh sir is unable to present his screen, he can just share his file with us and we can present it on his behalf.
Perfect. Dinesh sir, can you please share your file with the committee members so that can be, shared with our esteemed panelists. They can review it, and if there are some perspective which they have to offer, they can offer it at the end of the session. Till then, again, your clock is running. I would recommend that you continue.
I'm trying to verbally present the paper. Sir. So, beginning of globalization and new liberalism can be witnessed in the policy of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan during the 8th and 9th decade of 20th century. That commenced procedure of deregulation and privatization drive of most of the state control institutions. Policy of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan not only deregulated the economy, but it also endorsed the free flow of capital, services, and trade all over the world. In the same manner, it denounced the welfare measures and affirmative safeguards to the needy and underprivileged people who were looking towards the government for their better future. Globalization advocated the uniform economic policy for every state where will be less restrictions by the government and state control on economic affairs must be sustained. India also adopted the new economic policy in the last decade of 20th century under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao led UPA government. The real intention behind adoption of new economic policy was to promote the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, which are the basic characteristics of free economy, which gave space to world-level actors for contest in Indian economy. Globalization, liberalization, and privatization are basic features of any economy that promote export-led development and attract foreign investors and companies to participate in the financial activities of any particular country. However, some signs of such reforms can also be realized during the 8th decade of 20th century when India got some finances from big financing institutions of the world. Influx of big actors for land acquisition means after adaptation of new economic policy, many big actors became active in land acquisition. The idea of free economy is based on the formula of World Bank and International Monetary Fund, which ask for the deregulation of most resources, including natural, that were earlier under the control of the state authority. In the wake of India's adoption of new economic policy, various companies became active in various fields like real estate sectors, mining, and their infrastructure development, and for special economic zone. While India opened its economy for the global competition and free flow of services and technology, many giant MNCs like POSCO and Vedanta came in India to invest and install their producing unit. For establishing their factories and companies, they tried to acquire huge amount of land from the peasants and tribal people. People who were about to lose their land had vehemently protested against the big corporation houses and companies. Sometimes their protests have attracted world intellectuals and activists towards their protests and demands. These companies like POSCO and Vedanta had tried to take land from, with the help of the state government, from the tribal and poor people, which have caused the great concern to other nearby living residents. POSCO is still PASCO is still continue to land grab in some tribal areas of India. Likewise, Vedanta has also is also active in some parts of India. The land grab by multinational companies is widespread and it is not centered in only India, but across the globe. Many poor nations of the third world countries and nations of Latin America and other South Asian countries, people have also many times protested against the greed of these companies. These companies come in the guise of developing actors, but left with the poverty, displacement, and disappointment to the poor people. Therefore, these people get traumatized by the big government products. Many projects
I have to stop you over there because your time is about to get up. So I would just request you to come to the conclusion and put your argument in front of us. Okay?
Okay. Sir. Yes, sir. Sir, conclusion is, although globalization has made the life easy and it has increased the comfort level of individuals, but it has also posed many problems to individuals. To create infrastructure and rapid industrialization, government has made many farmers landless and many people have been dislocated. Tribal and indigenous people have been displaced from their original habitats. This has created sense of insecurity in such people, which have remained very problematic for the tribal people. One side, government has passed the Food Security Act, which provisions to provide nutritious food to every individual. Another side, it has snatched thousands of acres of agricultural land from hardworking peasants. As a result of globalization, these scenes are not restricted in any particular regions, but can be visualized at a global level also. Many world level institutions and agencies like Food and Agricultural Organization World Food Program have taken steps and have requested governments to genuinely work for the ensuring food to every individual. So that's all from my side.
Thank you. Thank you, Dinesh. Your presentation, I wanted to make a comment on that. That your contentions have been beautifully put in, and you have raised an issue which is actually a concern for civilizations and countries throughout the world. So thank you for raising this concern. I would like to invite our next participant. We have Muhammad Yasin and Shadan Qadri. Now, before they come up and take up the floor, I would like to point it out that we have to understand that we have witnessed a global pandemic, and it has been said that while we have had a troubled time in the past, but there's a bright side of things as well. You see, we have there's a saying which says that necessity is the mother of all invention. So even in the in the worst of the situation, something bright can always come up, and I believe their paper deals with something like that, with the topic that is tinkered cooperative federalism in India amidst COVID-19. There are lessons for future governance and way forward. So I welcome both the participants. The floor is now all yours. You have 7 minutes. I welcome you guys.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adil, for calling me on the dais. A very good afternoon, respected chair and the participants. Actually, I am pursuing LLM in constitutional law from National Law University, Assam. And my co-author, who has also authored this paper, is pursuing Masters in Peace and Conflict from Jamia Millia Islamia. So the topic of our paper is Tinkered Cooperative Federalism in India amidst the COVID-19, Lessons for Future Governance and Way Forward. So with this, I would like to focus on a few aspects. The decisions majorly which were taken by the governments, both at the center and the state, and how these decisions have impinged the idea of cooperative federalism. Now, the scope of my topic goes beyond the theme of this particular session, as Dr. Atul in the very beginning highlighted that we are focusing on other aspects as well. And secondly, since most of the decisions have already been taken, we are way ahead of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are the lessons that we can take forward and we can have a future good governance? So firstly, I'd like to start with the decisions that were taken by the government. Firstly, with respect to the COVID-19 policy the COVID-19 rollout policy that took place. In the very beginning in April, during the second wave, the pricing of the COVID-19 vaccination was a big issue. Secondly, the procurement of the COVID-19 vaccine by the central government. And thereafter, the distribution was totally left at the discretion of the central government. The states were left at the disposal of the central government's decision. So that is something which impinges upon the idea of cooperative federalism, which I would like to make a point here. And secondly, apart from the COVID-19 vaccines, there were other essential commodities like remdesivir, Fabiflu, and other medical essential commodities, which were in the black market, and the sellers were charging exorbitant amount for these essential drugs and the commodities. Now, this reminds me of a book written by the Harvard professor, Michael Sandel, Justice, What is the Right Thing to Do? He points out in the very first chapter that in Florida, a hurricane hit, wherein the entire country was destructed, and the sellers who had the essential commodities were charging exorbitant amount to the people. So this COVID-19 pandemic takes me to the book which was written by Professor Sandel in 2010 and gives a very clear and a practical picture that during these circumstances, the governments and the players in the market are duty bound to, perform in the interest of people rather than just thinking about the profit and making merry out of others' miseries. So this should have been avoided. Secondly, with respect to the public distribution schemes of the central government and the state government. So there was a clash between certain states as well as the central government. One such example is that of the Delhi government. When the Delhi government tried to implement its public distribution scheme, rations for the poor, whereas the central government scheme, which is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, came in conflict with this scheme, and the central government objected to it and did not allow the Delhi government scheme to function. So this, on a very similar line, there was a tussle between the Delhi government and the central government again before in 2018 and 2019. There was a famous case which was decided by the Supreme Court, GNCT Delhi versus Union of India, wherein the court highlighted the importance of cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism, wherein today we need to adopt a more pragmatic approach rather than having political vendetta against the other state or the other ruling party. So this is one very important judgment, a 5-judges bench judgment of the Supreme Court, which focuses on the cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting cooperative federalism here is that when the Constitution was enacted in 1950, so the conditions therein were different from the conditions that we have today. There was a situation where the states were required to be annexed. The states were required to be brought within the dominion of India. And Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was given the duty to bring all the states within the dominion of India. So therefore, it was thought that having a strong center at the top would be more reasonable at this point of time so that the states should not split up. So now the situation is different. Like we are way ahead 70 years of that period. And now we can hope for a cooperative federalism wherein the state government and the central government can collaborate and come up with pragmatic steps and decisions so that the social justice or the ends of justice should be met and the people should not suffer. And that is also reflected from the directive principles of state policy under Chapter 4 of the Part 4 of the Constitution as well. Now, due to paucity of time, I quickly refer to the recommendations that I want to make and the lessons that we can learn for future good governance. Now, there is this Epidemic Diseases Act, which says that the states have the power to invoke the provisions of Epidemic Diseases Act in the times of situations like COVID-19. But the problem with this act is that it has section 2 capital A, which again gives the power to the central government and therefore nullifies the effect, nullifies the power that was given to the state government. And therefore we again have a center which is very strong at the top, and the states are left at the disposal of the decisions of the central government. Secondly, there is this provision under the Constitution itself, Article 263, which provides for interstate councils, which can be set up by the president in situations like these. Now, there was a migrant crisis which we saw during the lockdown. So that crisis could have been well tackled if the central government or the president could have constituted an interstate council straight away in order to deal with that situation swiftly. So the interstate councils should be strengthened and should be set up. The Epidemic Diseases Act need to be abolished, and therefore there was a bill that was introduced in 2017. The name of the bill is Public Health Prevention, Control and Management of Epidemics, Bioterrorism and Disasters Bill. Now this bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha but did not see the light of the day. Now what's interesting in this bill is that it mentions COVID-19 as a virus, as a mutating virus in its schedule, and gives powers to the governments, both at the center and the state level, to deal with a situation like this. Now, this bill was introduced in 2017, and immediately after 2 to 3 years, we had a very similar situation like this, and we were left to apply an archaic law, which was the Epidemic Diseases Act, to deal with this situation. So in sum and substance, the center still has the upper hand in most of the decisions, and the states are left at the disposal of the discretion of the state government itself. Therefore, the time has come that today we need to imbibe the idea of cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism more and more, so that the ends of justice and the social security is secured towards the end of the people. So that's all from my side of the presentation.
Thank you, Yasin. That was a wonderful presentation. Now we have Namit Kumar Srivastava with his title, Governance of the Outer Space, Issues and Challenges in the New Era. Namit, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm audible and visible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a very good afternoon to everyone, respected chair and respected co-chair. I am Namit Kumar Srivastava, and I am assistant professor at School of Law, Sharda University right now. And my today's title is the Governance of the Outer Space, Issues and Challenges in the New Era. Now, when we talk about outer space resources, when we talk about outer space resources usage and exploitation or exploration, we can observe a few things. First of all, in the past few decades or 2 decades, that there are important new developments in the field of exploration and use of outer space. And these developments are in a way forcing the international space law community to adopt certain changes in the existing legal order. Now, why these changes have come up? The first thing, the changes have come up because now the international space community is in a way allowing the private capital to enter into the outer space resource usage and exploration. So we can call it the era of commercialization and profit making in the outer space. Earlier, we saw prior to 2 or 3 decades that the field was only for the, let's say, public purposes or for strategic purposes for the national governments and also for the international community. But because we can see a clear trend now that commercialization is needed. Why it is needed? Why it is required? It is required for the simple reason that maybe the national governments are having the capability, but they do not have the capacity to exploit or explore the resources for the larger human good. Now, the international community maybe have made its mind very clear that they want the outer space environment to be exploited for the larger common good on the earth. So in that sense, they have started considering the outer space environment as an extension of the earth's own environment when it comes to the resource exploitation. Now, what is happening right now? Because the existing space order, which is there, which is based on 5 important treaties and some guidelines and the guidelines and regulations provided by the UN General Assembly, and also some kind of rules, etc. So, if you see, the last legally binding treaty came in the year 1984. That was the Moon Treaty. And we all know that the Moon Treaty also did not receive the type of reception it needed to when it comes to the adoption of or the ratification of that Moon Treaty. So we can see that 1984 and after that, we do not have any legally binding instruments. Because when we are entering into commercialization phase of the space, then we need legally binding instruments. For instance, we are having Liability Convention 1972, but Liability Convention 1972 has its own issues and problems. Like for instance, the concept of fault liability and no fault liability, which is there in the Liability Convention. Also, the Outer Space Treaty, which was the very first treaty, 1967, which can be called as the Umbrella Treaty. Outer Space Treaty also having some of the very important concepts, no doubt, like space is the province of all mankind and space is for all and everything. So in a way, the Outer Space Treaty, the Liability Convention, the Rescue Agreement, the Moon Treaty, all of these treaties, conventions are talking about space as global commons. When space is a global common, so we need global governance also. We need global governance for the outer space. But the thing is, the prior era, which was public sector based, now we are entering into commercialization. We have seen the startups are coming up, the big blenders are coming up. They are trying to exploit the resources of the outer space by tourism, by celestial mining, by trying to establish some kind of permanent stations there. So these things are going to create problems which the current legal regime might not be having answers to. The most important problem that we are going to see in the near future is the problem of space debris. Though the problem of space debris was there earlier also, but in the new circumstance, because a lot of space activities are going to happen or happening, we are going to see a lot of activities, especially in the orbital space. Because if you see the orbital space are the limited resources. Though space is infinite, space is infinite, but the orbital space is not infinite, because only few orbits are there we can place satellites into. And therefore, the space becomes limited. The orbital space becomes limited. So we have seen the concept of cascading effect. So let's say in near future, some kind of accident happens in the orbital space, which would create a lot of debris, and those debris would create further debris and further debris, which would be cascading effect, which would be disastrous for the whole orbital space and therefore for the humankind also. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the present legal order in the outer space, the regulation, the governance is not going to give you all the answers in the coming future. Therefore, we maybe need a new kind of legal order, especially in the context of commercialization and profit making, to ensure liability, to ensure environmental sustainability in the outer space. Though we are having guidelines, we are having mitigation guidelines when it comes to space debris. We are also having long-term sustainability guidelines coming from the UN General Assembly. But the point I'm trying to make here is that these are only guidelines. Okay, these are not legally binding instruments. So for that we need domestic legislations also. We all know India also is trying to commercialize its space sector. India also has Entrix. India also has InSpace. Only recently in 2020, by way of notification, the government of India in a way opened up the outer space for the commercial capital. But India also does not have the domestic legislation. The Space Bill was presented in the year 2017-18, but it didn't see the light of the day. Okay, so when it comes to liability, when it comes to ensuring the sustainability of the outer space activities, we lack laws domestically as well as internationally. So when we talk about governance of the outer space, also we talk about the global north and global south, because only a handful of countries are having the expertise, the technical advantage, and the capital to exploit the resources of the outer space. But when you see the concept of global common, you will find that global commons should be shared by all. So when it is going to be shared by all, we need the resource sharing, the technology sharing, capital sharing between the so-called global north and the global south, because the outer space is for all. Outer space is for all. So because of these issues, because of the commercialization aspect, because of the consideration of the outer space environment as the extension of the Earth's own environment for the larger common good, we need a new legally binding legal order. That is what the main point I wanted to make through my this article, this presentation. And to do that, we need further negotiations. We need further negotiations at the international arena. We need concrete instruments, legally binding instruments, ensuring all these issues involved in the new era. Thank you. That is all from my side.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed very insightful. Now we have Aishwarya Singh on a paper, the topic of which is Abuse of Power, a critical analysis on separation of power and political accountability. Aishwarya, the floor is all yours, please.
Yeah, can I exit the screen? My screen is visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. So my name is Aishwarya Singh, and I'm an LLM student from Christ University, Bangalore, and I'm doing my master's in IPR, Intellectual Property and Trade Laws. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present my paper in front of like Atul sir and Dr. Premchand. So moving ahead. So as we know, separation of power is one of the critical features that represent the democratic system of our government. And that the three branches that represent democratic features are legislature, executive, and judiciary. And all three organs have a distinct features and are independent from one another. This is what commonly we know about separation of power. And on political accountability, mandates the answerability of the government for every legal action, with the scheme, with its law, with this any development program, welfare program, everything. Political accountability exists with our leaders and the law governing authorities. As we know, political constituencies and their branches are directly and indirectly interconnected and simultaneously leaves room for abuse of power. And in order to eliminate authoritative involvement traced within the framework of separation of power, we have also introduced checks and balances. And whether that really works, that we will see in this concept. So moving ahead, so we have some questions when we talk about separation of power. Like, what is separation of power? Why is it important? Whether separation of power practically implemented in a present political environment, or although these checks and balances are really necessary, or are they really working out, and how they are working out. So moving ahead, separation of power. As I told you, separation of power is a significant feature that represents a democratic system of government. And this doctrine tries to bring exclusiveness in the functioning of the three organs. And hence, a strict demarcation of power is an aim sought to be achieved by this principle. And this doctrine signifies the fact that one person or body of persons should not exercise all the three power of the government. That simply means in order to decentralize the centralize the power, in one hand we are trying to decentralize the power in three different organs, right? So we have legislative, we do like who makes the law, executive who execute law, and we have judiciary who who implements the law and actions of the citizens or government. So this was a major theme we had with the separation of power. So where the things went wrong, why we can't be very rigid with this concept, why we need checks and balances, why there is a political accountability interface so that checks and balances need to be introduced. So moving ahead, so I want to give a very gist or a brief out Montesquieu concept and the medicine concept. So Montesquieu concept, it talks about the absolute power tend to corrupt absolute. Okay, so he have a concept of separation of power in form of republican, monarchy, and despotism. Okay, and his famous book is the Spirit of Laws that divides the political authority into three branches. So moving ahead, as I told you, he told there will be division of power and their function in the administration. Okay, that the same concept I told you, separation of power, and he believed in that the concentration of power may result in tyranny. So moving ahead with the medicine picture of separation of power. So he believes separation of parties, not powers. So this means there is a need of checks and balances. Agreed. There is a separation of powers, branches need to be independent, okay, and still, but to understand, to have a check over one another, to avoid abuse of power, avoid that tyranny in the single branch, there is requirement of certain checks and balances, and that is what it's talk under this medicine picture of separation of power. Next, I will talk about the separation of power act as a barrier to administrative law. Okay, so as I told you, like administrative law is a division of law that governs the executive branch of the government. Here, we don't have the administrative branch, but as per the burden of cases, depending upon the burden of burden of pending cases and the other regulatory stuffs, we have to introduce administrative laws. And the very reason for this
Shreya, I have to interfere over here. You see, you have the time is almost up, but again, I'll be giving you like 2 minutes to summarize your presentation. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay. So, the systematic establishment of administrative tribunal and the legislative delegation has been assigned to reduce and manage the load of legislation and judiciary and to speed up the lawmaking justice. Okay. So, next I want to go with the conflict. Conflict at very on simple term, I want to tell you the interference of legislative, executive, and judiciary among one another. Okay, how legislative is interfering in executive and how judiciary is interfering in both executive and the legislation. This is where I want to talk on separation of power and its conflict. So further on the dilution of separation of power. So according to me, when dilution comes, separation of power loses intensity. Dilution of power is like it start to the separation of power line started diminishing when dilution comes. So as we know, Section 1 of US Constitution already have the explicit of separation of power, but India still lack that explicitiveness in their legislation, and the only two articles that deal is Section 50 and Section 50 and 53 that separates executive from judiciary, and there they lack the separation of power exactly. Next, about the very major concept of judicial interference in executive and legislative functioning. So I want to please focus on the two cases of judicial activism, that is Common Cause versus Union of India. In this, Supreme Court has directed legislation ensuring safety of the people on the road, on ground, that directing a legislation was not within the purview of judiciary. They denied from making any guidelines on the ground for the ensuring safety of the people on the road. But contrary, in the Vishakha versus state of Rajasthan, the guidelines to prevent sexual harassment of women at workplace was also provided as a Vishakha guidelines. And later, and if we talk about judicial overreach, we can see the Kailash and others versus state of Maharashtra, where a Dalit woman was beaten and ripped naked, but here all, and the judicial misadvertism and such of the observation and judgment in the realm of obiter dicta, it was wholly needless to decide the case before the court. And political accountability. In crisp, I will tell you political accountability mandate answerability. Answerability, transparency, and accountability all goes hand in hand. And in a democratic system, without political accountability, system may collapse and become autonomy and dictatorship. That's very obvious. So moving ahead, what's the relation of separation of power and political accountability? Why I'm talking about both of them, why I'm criticizing both of them. We need separation of power. We also need checks and balances. But where the role played under the sheet of political norm is the abuse of office of personal gain. Personal gain, corruption, and then the extent exceed the limit where action through punishing transgression. So the separation of power is quoted with an appropriate shield of checks and balances, but still there is a risk of abuse of power that we can clearly understand in our today's political environment. So finally, I want to conclude here this key. We don't need a rigid separation of power. There is everything have a room of abuse, but political freedom of speech should also be provided to the citizen, and there should be like under the shadow of appropriate checks and balances, political accountability should also be entertained and should be witnessed and should be given a floor to be showed, and people should question the government about the same. What's happening, how the votes are being utilized and how are being presented. So thank you so much, and I hope like this presentation made sense to you all, and thank you for your time.
That was a wonderful presentation, Aishwarya. I congratulate you on your presentation. Next, we have Soumya Ranjandas on a topic, homosexual unions in the age of globalization, acceptance vis-a-vis rejection of international norms. So over to you, Soumya.
Soumya is not here. Aishwarya, please stop sharing. Aishwarya, stop sharing.
Sure.
So since Soumya is not present with us, we'll move on to our next presenter, whom we have Rishika Jain and Priyal Jain with their presentation on the topic, dichotomy between archaic wheel and Western genes. Can it be relatively universal? So the floor is all yours, Rishika and Priyal.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I'll start sharing the screen. Hi, is like my screen visible to you guys?
Yes, please, it is visible. You can please continue.
Okay. Thank you. So, hi, I'm Rishika. Good afternoon to everybody. And me, along with my co-author Priyal, would be presenting the paper titled Dichotomy Between the Archaic Wheel and Western Genes. Can it be relatively universal? We are second-year law students from Institute of Law, Nirma University, pursuing a BLLB. And we would really like for you to hold your questions till the end of our presentation. Now, I would like Priyal to start with the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Rishika. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting our paper on the title Dichotomy between Archaic Wheel and Western Genes. Can it be relatively universal? You all might be thinking like what is Archaic Wheel and what is just Western Genes? Why we included these not so related terms here, right? So in next few minutes, you will understand what these two terms actually refers to. The world changed from archaic hardliners time to this community mass media and advancement, but there are still metaphors like go back to Vedas that entice people to go back in times. This shows the duality between cultural relativism and universalism. But what do I mean by these two terms, universalism and cultural relativism? Rishika, next slide, please. When I am talking about universalism, the idea of universalism is often traced back to political philosopher John Locke that every human being is born with some inalienable rights which cannot be taken back. These are life, liberty, and property, which was subserviently written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the form of articles where all humans are equal and has acceptable to everyone. This is mainly being called as Westphalian theory-based global law made by majorly West elite authoritarian people in the form of universal principles, wherein we referred it as Western genes in the title. Some countries do follow it, but some countries takes a different stance altogether, following their cultural human rights. This is where the cultural relativism comes into picture, which we are trying to show in title by name of Archaic Wheel, presenting the historic Indian culture aspect. The central principle is that one's culture is the focal point of view to measure the practices and norms of all the other cultures. It can be reasonably apprehended that the person has more than one identity marker and several roles thereby, making them part of different belief system or models in different situations. Thus, there can't be one universal human right concept, but different culture perspective has to be taken into consideration. Now, coming ahead with the relationship, what is the relationship between these two concepts? Cultural relativism and universalism are the concepts that are defined through the denial and interrelation of each other. As the culture doesn't work in vacuum and the societal institutions are based on culture itself, there is a need to understand that culture is present on global level too, and that global culture is what universalism is in loose terms. And when it comes into smaller spheres of culture within a nation, then the tussle between culture relativist and universalist comes into picture. Now, basing on the relationship, how human rights are affected by the concepts of archaic wheel and Western genes, cultural relativism and universalism respectively. Since its inception, the debate is happening between universalism and cultural relativism regarding its notion being fiercely opposed by critics in different parts of the world and it only gaining traction with the passage of time. The problems associated with these two concepts have their origin and interaction with the society in the practical sense, which has been explained through the theories of economic imperialism and ethnocentrism. The debate essentially is that the soft hegemony of majoritarian culture, which is West for now, gives us a picture of developed society that is endorsed due to the economic success of the state endorsing that culture further. A popular narrative in the United States. But the supposed social mobility that makes only the efforts of an individual the guiding factor to success is a false on two levels. Firstly, social mobility. Social mobility is little to none for a person who doesn't have the privilege to be viewed as an entity that can have the potential to contribute to the society economically. As even to get a minimum wage job, the person will have to go through the biases of upper echelons of society, which is rarely possible for some disadvantaged groups. Secondly, the efforts of the individual to succeed are required on a greater level when such groups are in question. This is the first problem of economic imperialism. The second problem is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is an anthropological concept and has taken the political stance where it rejects the other culture's moral standards and practices implying their culture is supreme. It rejects John Locke's definition of universalism and portrays that human rights are not inherent in nature, not naturally born, but taught by their parents, which are influenced by culture only. It shows the prejudice of one culture over the other and ignores the cultural, economic, and political realities of human rights, perceiving the threat of never-ending debate between cultural relativism and universalism. These problems can be seen in the narrative of Sharia law and Islam, where they take a stance based on extremist approach towards the practices of their religion, like punishing the individual in the same magnitude as the degree of crime he did according to their religious prophets. Even there are various Muslim dominated groups like ISIS, where they justified its act of terrorism by the cultural practices and religious scripts and denying the universalism concept altogether. This approach can't be accepted as it is incorrect on various grounds and taking altogether an anarchism hardliners approach of denying basic human rights and fundamental freedoms. We tried to show the problems associated with these concepts through various theories of jurist and real-based examples. Now, what could be the solution? To avoid this elite reflection and other associated problems, it has to consider the concept of human rights from the lens of practical realities of cultural and poor countries, views with no imbibed bias for vast intervention in the affairs of developing world. What more UDHR needs is the discussion and implementation of human rights, because giving human rights and practicing human rights are different things that didn't get considered for decades. What needs is the checks and balances to implement the human rights and legit provide them in the real sense, considering the actual realities of the poor countries as well. Rishika will be concluding the presentation.
So thank you, Priyal. And as for the conclusion, we would like to present how these theoretical concepts essentially affect us. One, when we consider human rights in a global world, we have to consider that these theoretical concepts have ramification in those terms. How is that? When we see that Cold War had gone on for such a long time, and the major tussle between the two camps was that of soft hegemony too. So clearly here we can see that the cultural concept has an imprint on the global world, which we do need to consider in current terms also. And secondly, the human rights as we view it right now are what provides dignity to human beings universally. We do need that concept because states, people, and communities are interacting with each other on such a huge level. And what do we need now is that the human rights are to be respected and to be implemented in a way that is that does provide human dignity to everybody. But what we do not want here is that manifestation of human dignity in terms of Western principles. We do not want human dignity to be just one way. There are cultures whose contexts need to be considered, and that is why we say that this is how we conclude our presentation here. We would really like to answer your questions if there are any.
Thank you, Rishika and Priyal. Your presentation has been amazing, but we'll have to allow the questions only at the end of this whole session. So you'll have to wait by then. The chair would be putting your questions again at that stipulated time. Okay. So excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite our next participant. We have Swati Singh Parmar on our topic, exercising the colonial ghost in a geographical South classroom. Over to you, Swati.
Yes, thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My sincere regards to the chair and co-chair. I'm Swati. I teach international law. So my topic of presentation, the paper is titled Exorcising the Colonial Ghost in a Geographical South Classroom, because we come from geographical South of the world map. Now, this dramatic topic, because of the colonial and semi-colonial drama that has been created in the map of South Asia by the European powers, and that precisely guides my paper. So the flow of the presentation would be what are the problems that I am discussing in this paper, the probable reasons of it, and then the possible solutions to it. So why I write this paper, the precise reason is that we have always been taught international law in a way as if it is something which is the gift of the West, as we all know. And this is the problem that I personally have been facing in teaching international law to the students. as they tend to see international law as something alien. And once you treat something alien, they don't imbibe the concepts of international law. And this I say because of the number of universities that offer LLM with international law specialization, and the number of scholars who actually pursue their higher studies, their PhD and postdoc programs from India in international law or allied fields. Now, as we all know, whatever books that come on international law, the textbooks that we refer to, we hardly have 2 or 3 textbooks from Indian authors. There have been upcoming new books from last couple of years, but most of the books that we teach international law from are they come from Europe. So I've also enlisted the authors like Malcolm Shaw, Malcolm D. Evans, Akehurst, and I've seen their place of birth, countries of birth, and their countries of universities where they were teaching, and precisely all of them come from the Europe. So it's not only about the theory, the principle, the approach, but also the people and their voices, which are based in Europe, whom we have been reading and therefore eulogizing. So the standard book, even in the remotest parts in geographical South, be it South Asia or Africa, has to be Malcolm Shaw, because it is a European voice which has been authenticated by the Europe and also by the non-European world like us. We have eulogized Europe in every possible sense, in the history, cultural, socio-economic forms, everything. Now that is the exact problem that I'm trying to deal with in this paper. The possible solutions, because of the less research time, and I could not give much empirical study, could not substantiate it much. Therefore, the possible problems that I share in the paper are, there are 2. One is the Austinian handicap, as David Harris, the international lawyer, calls it. And second is the colonial history. So what is Austinian handicap? Since most of these students are introduced public international law as a subject, usually in a 5-year law course, usually in 5th semester or 7th semester, that is the exactly time when a student has already imbibed a lot of concepts of criminal law, procedural laws, constitution, which essentially make a law student's mind positivist. Now, since all of us turn positivist, we fail to look beyond the definition of Austin, and the triad of definition of Austin about law, the command, sovereign, and sanction. The trinity of command, sovereign, and sanction is the same which we try to find in international law. And as we all know, international law's definition would not fulfill the 3 ingredients that Austin gave in his definition of law. So this Austinian handicap is one thing that has been debated since the time of J.G. Stark. J.G. Stark has beautifully replied to this Austinian handicap, but still international law suffers from this problem of justifying, and that is because it's always debated from a positivist perspective, and the renewal of natural law theory these days with recent scholars in Yale University has now actually shifted the debate. But yes, that momentum is quite less in comparison to what regression Austinian handicap has created for many years against international law being treated as law. So even now in law schools, the initial classes of the syllabus go to tell that whether international law is a true law or not, which is a sad part also. And that takes much of the area in the syllabus, while we have a lot of other things which we do not include in the syllabus. And that is my second reason. This is about the colonial history of international law. We, coming from geographical South, as teachers and as students, we have an onus towards the students to teach about the colonial history of international law, which we do not teach. So I tried to see the syllabus of various national law universities. I could not see the syllabus of traditional universities. I could not find many syllabus on websites. So after looking at the syllabus, I found that almost none had a module or a subtopic on history of international law. Now, while University of London, Cambridge University, and Edinburgh University in their MA in International Law and LLM in International Law programs have an entire course devoted to history of international law, we coming from Geographical South, we don't do it. And that creates a problem, because why international law cannot grant justice, why international law has been lopsided, why do we have veto and double veto at Security Council, why is there permanent membership of 5 countries? We would not understand that unless we have acquainted ourselves to the history of international law, which is quite colonial. So we have not touched that. So that is the second major root cause. It also branches out into several problems, but I'll not dwell into it. Now, what can be the possible solutions? I do not know whether I'm right in proposing these solutions or not, but these are the experiments that I have done in my teaching. So that's why I share two main possible solutions. One is, whatever international law we read, it is the European approach, the Eurocentric approach that is served to us in plate, and we are very happily having it. But we fail to see that there are alternative approaches, especially the critical approaches to international law, which are even more important for the students of Geographical South and also the teachers of Geographical South. So, for example, the widely known critical approach that has come from Geographical South, from the scholars like James Thogathi from Africa, Professor B.S. Chimney from India, late Professor R.P. Anand, V.S. Mani, Justice Nagin Singh, is TWAIL, that is Third World Approaches to International Law. Now, while there are many TWAIL thinkers in the world right now, but Indian scholars have created a lot of readings on TWAIL, like R.P. Anand's works, most of them, B.S. Chimney's work, most of them. But we still do not have many scholars contemporarily working on third world approaches to international law from India. And I argue in my paper that introducing alternative approaches like third world approaches to international law, fourth world approaches to international law, which is even more relegated to the periphery of teaching of international law, which is precisely the indigenous voices, that and the queer and feminist and post-colonial voices to international law must be included in first or second module of the syllabus for graduation of public international law. Now, these are the possible solutions. The second one, this is the first solution. Second possible solution is we don't pay much attention to philosophy of international law. So maybe redeeming the glory of philosophy in international law can tell us a lot of things which we fail to see in the existing international law right now. So even the problem that Austinian handicap creates in international law, I try to address it with maybe it could, the philosophy, teaching of philosophy of international law could fill those gaps. I will wind up here. So this was my paper. I'll be happy to have comments or questions.
Thank you, Swati ma'am. That was a wonderfully illustrated presentation and raising a glaring issue in the international law. Next, we have Prateek Tripathi and Akansha Pathak on the topic Role of International Financial Institutions in Promoting Development vis-a-vis Achieving Global Distributive Justice. So over to you. Swati ma'am,
yeah,
can you
thank you, Adil.
Thank you.
May I share the screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Prateek Tripathi, Junior Research Fellow from Faculty of Law, Lucknow University. And my co-author is Akansha Pathak. She is a research scholar from Ram Manohar Lohia National Law University. I will be presenting my research paper on the topic of role of international financial institutions in promoting development vis-a-vis achieving global distributive justice. So first of all, going into the the core topic of international financial institutions, I would like to give a brief background of international financial institutions, what are they and how they have evolved since time immemorial. So the basic meaning of the international financial institutions are those institutions which have been established by more than one country and have a common goal of promoting the development of the countries. So as we have previously discussed about the World Bank and IMF in the, I think the first presenter has previously has described these World Bank and World Bank and IMF. So I will be going into the evolution phase of these international financial institutions. So these the evolution phase of the international financial institutions can be divided into 3 generations. So the first generation was the result of the Bretton Woods consensus, where IBRD and IMF evolved. So the basic role of IBRD was aimed at providing monetary hold to nations to help in development of basic necessities. And secondly, the goal of IMF was to stabilize exchange rates and supervise the reconstruction of the global international payment system. Now, the second generation, where we find that the combination of IDA and IBRD, which later known as World Bank. So this came into the effect to help develop the least developed economies or countries. And the third generation is the EBRD, which is kind of a regional development bank, where we can have examples of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and now we have BRICS Bank also. So the new era has taken its step to develop the new era of these IFIs. So the first issue related to the IFIs comes into the picture, where we can say that what is the nature of the IFIs? So where we study in the company law also that when we lift the corporate wheel, who is behind those IFIs or who is behind those companies? So IFIs own a dual nature. First of all, they are managed by the states, and the second, their financial transactions are owned by their executive directors and other counterparts. So the main issue arises, where is the functional independence? Like they are transacting the financial works. So who shall be liable on behalf of those financial transactions? The states or the executive directors? So, and the mandate of the IFIs also works as the same as the company, like there are articles of agreement, and which are the kind of constitution to them, and they work on the basis of those texts. Now, coming to the constitutional and structural dynamics of the international financial institutions, which is eye-opening to the many scholars all over the world, that how these international financial institutions work. Like, what is the source and what is the voting share of the countries who are behind controlling these international financial institutions? So as we have already discussed the role of IMF and World Bank, so I won't go into the description of the role of IMF very briefly. So the primary role of IMF is economic surveillance, technical assistance, and lending. So we have already discussed in the first paper also. And now I will go into the intricacies of how the IMF gets its money. So first of all is the quota subscription. 25% of the money comes from the quota subscription. And secondly, the borrowing arrangements. And third is the interest charged and fee. So what is quota in the IMF? Each member country of the IMF is assigned a quota based broadly on its relative size in the world economy and characteristics. The size of the quotas determine the voting power. IMF decides on the quota for each member. Developed countries have a larger quota. Quotas are reviewable every 5 years. So now in this pie chart, we can see that how these quota shares are divided between the countries. We can see the red marking on the pie chart, as the USA still have the largest quotas and vote share in the IMF, and the rest are divided among the different parts of the countries, different part of the world. So now coming to the second issue is the IMF working. Is it democratic or democratic deficit? So the voting power of the IMF is based on the quota system. Each member has a number of basic votes plus one additional vote for each special drawing right. So SDRs, special drawing rights, refer to the foreign exchange reserve as maintained by IMF. Hence, it is like the global currency of the IMF. It was created as an international reserve asset by the IMF in 1969. It is also called paper gold. SDRs are allotted to member countries in proportion to their IMF quotas. The USA holds, as we have discussed, holds more than 17% of the total votes in the IMF. So we can see that the Western hegemony here, how USA holds the major chunk of the voting share, and it has the veto power to sabotage any of the decisions of the IMF. IMF voting system is therefore essentially undemocratic and inflexible. Even if the country grows economically, there is no change in the voting patterns. As we have seen till now, the countries that have grown have been underrepresented in the voting system, right? So this is the chart where we can see that what is the million special drawing rights. If we compare the US and India, we can clearly see the discrepancies where the percentage of special drawing rights are in such great number held to the USA and such major number to the India. Now coming to the good part of the IMF policies with respect to Indian story, where we can see the when India was at the verge of the first financial emergency in 1991, India faced a severe balance of payments crisis. Government was unable to service debts acquired from abroad. Steep fall in forest reserve of country to about $8 billion. High inflation, large fiscal and current account deficit, heavy growing burden of domestic and foreign debt. So in this where India came to IMF with a request to lending. So there was an unprecedented fall of foreign exchange reserve made to the country to apply for fresh loans in IMF in exchange for physical delivery of gold. Even after the pledging of the gold reserve, the country had foreign exchange reserve left only for 2 weeks in the import. So the structural shift in the Indian economy came as the help from the IMF, where it pointed out some structural adjustment that they should leave away with the license Raj, and they should open their market in a way that the foreign companies can come and invest in India so that it can boom the economy of the Indian diaspora.
Prateek, I'll have to stop over there. Please, you see, your time limit has already been exhausted. So I'll give you like 2 minutes to please summarize.
I will.
Thank you.
I will be going into the lending policy and different approaches of these IFIs. So when we go into the basic structural adjustment program, where the IMF points out that the countries have to grow systematically on the basis of changes in their macroeconomic state of affairs and macroeconomic adjustment and reducing budget deficit. Then only they can lend those countries for any loan. And when we go into the structural adjustment, we can see that how this is a global injustice. In Kenya, 40% GDP is used to service debt. Zambia, 6.7% on social services, while 40% on debt servicing. Cameroon, 4.5% on social services and 37% on debt. Alarming figure, which we can see that the major part of their GDP goes into subserving the service debts only. Now we can move towards the what is the possible solution with respect to the distributive justice, and in the rise of the regional financial institutions is a means to ensure true distributive justice, like BRICS Bank and others.
One last minute. You see, all those 2 minutes are also exhausted. One last minute, please do conclude. Okay?
Just I am going to the conclusion. So the concluding part would be that as we have discussed, that there is a major hegemony shared by the Western countries. So there is a democratic deficit in the indoor management of the financial institutions. It has led to the widening of the inequalities in the least developed countries. The powerful lobbies of the developed nations are a great hindrance to ensure equal distribution of the resources. So I would like to end my presentation and give chance to other presenters. So thank you.
Thank you, Prateek.
Thank you.
Next, we have a last participant for today's session. We have Professor Dr. Saroj, ma'am, on a topic, disclosure of origin requirement really required. Okay, she'll be presenting it along with her with a co-author Praveen Yadav. Over to you.
Good afternoon, one and all present. My name is Praveen Yadav, a scholar at University Jaipur, and will be presenting the paper. The title is Disclosure of Origin Requirement Really Required. So it has its genesis with the concept of using, with the instance of using gene from the gene banks, the biological diversity. So this diversity, these genes were used through the source of traditional knowledge, which we have, the biological diversity rich countries, mainly they are developing countries. So they were having good traditional knowledge where people knew how to use biological resources. So this was appropriated by the biotech giants mainly in developed countries, and they started gaining intellectual property right, especially patents, and they were making money like fortune, a huge money. So this revived the colonial era and other instances in the mind of developing nations, and they started the demand of benefit sharing. If you are using our biological resource and traditional knowledge, then share the benefit with us. By making the product, you are earning a money, so you share benefit with us in turn of the raw material being provided by us. So to have that thing in the place, disclosure of origin requirement incepted. So basically it is a brainchild of India only. So let's talk about a brief background. So this disclosure of requirement, it was first introduced in TRIPS, but trade-related intellectual property, trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights, but it was not entertained there and told that it was said by the TRIPS technical committee that this concept is not under the expertise of TRIPS. So it went to WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, where committee was formed. So since then, this topic is under discussion and no concession has been achieved since 2002 till this date. So this article seeks to trace the journey of disclosure of origin requirement, that is DR, whilst portraying its relevance. So this misappropriation genes and cases of biopiracy is also the reason where we have this requirement of disclosure of origin requirement, because when you use the traditional knowledge and genetic resources and do not share the benefit, it comes out to be biopiracy. So now what happened in 1993, Convention on Biological Diversity was formed, and it was the result of this requirement of benefit sharing. On one side, benefit sharing was the notion, on the other side, protection of biodiversity, because we're losing biodiversity like anything. So UNEP took this situation, and Convention on Biological Diversity was framed, where countries were given sovereign right on their biological diversity. Thereafter comes the TRIPS in 1996. So TRIPS provide for the protection of patents, and it provides in under Article 27.3b that if this biodiversity is being used to get the patent, then it will be given protection. So we'll not be going in the details of microorganism and living beings, but if biological diversity is used, patent can be granted. It's a well established. So India started the notion of having disclosure of genetic resources in TRIPS via amendment. India, Brazil, Peru, they wanted amendment in Article 27.3b as well as in 29. But TRIPS did not, mainly because developed countries were not in this favor, so they could not get this amended. And then it was sent to WIPO. Again, it is there in WIPO. So what disclosure of origin requirement exactly wants? So it's a bundle of right. It requires that if you want to use our biological diversity and or associated traditional knowledge, you come to us, you take permission from us, we'll grant you permission, we'll sign access and benefit sharing agreement with you. You use that, you share the benefit with us. And when you file the patent application, you mention the source of origin. For example, you have some therapeutic properties of turmeric, mention that you have taken it from India and you have shared the benefit sharing agreement as well. So this is what disclosure of origin requirement wants. So now going through CBD and TRIPS. So TRIPS allows patents over where biological diversity is used, but it does not talk about benefit sharing agreement. And CBD is not a legally binding agreement. Okay. So the instance is that developing countries want TRIPS to acknowledge this so that at world scale, they have to follow the disclosure of origin requirement. What is happening now is they are not sharing. They are not telling from where they are taking the biological resources and they are using it and not sharing the benefit to track that. If it is happening at international level, all of them have to follow, but it is not happening. So as a result, national laws have been there, but they are not that effective. For example, India has national laws for this disclosure origin requirement under patent law. The Biodiversity Act 2002, it was made, and it specifically says for entering into a BSX and benefit sharing agreement before anyone wants to utilize the traditional knowledge and or genetic resources in this territory. So India is among the countries who have submitted certificate of compliance with Nagoya Protocol there to enhance the benefit sharing. It is a sister protocol to Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, if we take the example of Indonesia, it is also a developing countries and biological rich, but it does not have that expertise to deal with the topic at its own, because developing countries many are dealing with number of issues and hegemony aspects as well. So they have disclosure of origin requirement in their national legislation, but that is not that effective because expertise and infrastructure is not there. If we see USA is not a party of CBD. Okay, and why they are not a party to CBD? Because they think that if they become a party, then it will affect the innovation, because they are the giant when it comes to patent and use of biological diversity and these traditional knowledge. So there was a study which says that if US has to pay fair royalties, then it will come around to $5.1 billion yearly. So developed countries are not in favor of having such thing at an international portal because they have to share royalty on a very premium basis. So they are coming out of it. And US is also resisting the DR requirement in WIPO by saying it fall outside the WIPO IGC. And patent system should not be considered as enforcement agency. However, it has to be dealt with because intellectual property's traditional aspect is being penetrated. So conclusion is that the developing countries are the most affected and they lack technical infrastructure capacity in order to get over this problem, and developed nations on the other hand, they are resisting. So a robust system at international level is required to keep the things on track. So since we have IGC in deliberation and in TRIPS we do not have, but we require robust system at international level. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen, sir. With that, we come at the conclusion of our session today. I would like to invite our chairperson for today's session, Dr. A.K. Tiwari, sir, to give his comments and to give his perspective on the presentations which have been put forward today. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Adil. So we had wonderful presentations, though from diverse field, and so we all got benefited by attending this session, I guess. And some of the observations that I will share from you is that we had a paper regarding globalization that talked about farming and land grab. So I think a wonderful pick of the topic. Perhaps most of us, we did not notice this aspect that even multinational companies are coming because of this globalization and they are grabbing lands. But then I would like the paper presenter to give some solutions, some suggestions, because what I guess is that the law which is applicable in this case is uniform for the global entities and for the Indian entities. So what exactly was the purpose of choosing this topic and why this point has been raised? Because if a business is coming to India, obviously the people in India, they are getting benefited in terms of employment and all those things. Okay, so I think I felt that there is this gap. So if Dinesh ji is here, he would like to add something.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, Dinesh ji, you are audible.
Okay. Sir, can you revise the question again? Can you repeat the question, sir?
My question, my observation was that
Yes.
if any business is coming to India, obviously
Yes.
it is coming because the Indian law permits that. Okay,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there are many benefits to the economy in terms of employment and other things. And
Yes.
the law applicable to those businesses is the same. There is no
Yes.
difference. So why you chose this topic? What you want to highlight?
Sir, actually, it is good that India adopted the new economic policy and opened its economy and services. But the main concern is when these companies came in developing countries like India, their motives became only to grab more and more resources from the poor people or from the disadvantaged people. In lieu of that benefits, they do not provide the enough job to the people who have lost their land. So this is
Okay. So you have your own, this perception, and based on that, you have premised your thesis. That's all.
Yes.
That's all right. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, Mohammed Yashin, in fact, he highlighted aspect of cooperative federalism during pandemic. Okay, now we all must agree that this was unprecedented crisis, and obviously you may criticize, you may praise, we may have equally forceful arguments from both the sides, but we saw that when vaccine distribution and procurement was handed over to the state, there was chaos. Okay, so you may criticize center for not giving enough scope for state to act. At the same time, when this was done, you can take the other side and you can start criticizing that because states are having less resources, the center should have taken the burden. Okay, so things are a little complex, but then raising of the issue relating to PDF scheme and several other aspects such as essential drugs, they are really appreciable. I appreciate this paper much. And then we had Namit Kumar Srivastava ji for, he talked about governance of outer space, and it's a very timely, contribution in the field of the emerging knowledge of law. I congratulate Professor Namit for having chosen this topic. And obviously, so far, it was for the public interest that we were venturing into the space, outer space, and now it is for the fun. I mean, you may resort to space tourism actually, okay? And when the billionaires of the world, they are, they are entering into the world just for the enjoyment. So in the process, we are creating debris, and this is a serious issue. So yes, this was a very good contribution. Then Aishwarya talked about separation of powers and accountability. I understand that Aishwarya is a student, but my only advice to Aishwarya is that you should try to connect with the theme of the seminar. You must have noticed that there are papers from varied interest from the stream of law and otherwise, but they all have tried to connect to the theme of the seminar. Okay, so it was a good attempt, but henceforth in future, you should try to connect it with the theme of the seminar. Okay, and then Somaya talked about homosexual union in the age of globalization. No, Somaya was not present. So Rishika Jain and Priyal Jain, they talked about wheel and genes and human rights and cultural relativity. I mean, this is the right time to debate upon this. We all know that the entire country is debating on this issue. So again, a very contemporary issue. And I was highly impressed by Professor Swati Parmar's presentation regarding how to teach international law in Global South. But what I feel is that in Global South, especially if I talk about India, the core of the syllabus is decided by not the law institute, but by those who hold the competitive examination. Now, sitting in Lucknow, I can vouch for this, that if we do not teach the core of the syllabus, which is being offered to the students by, say, UPSC or, for example, the judicial services, will be a huge failure. Okay. So what we do is that at LB level, we try to complete the core of the syllabus of each of the subject as per the requirement of UPSC or for example, different public service examination, and then try to specialize. So she has raised an issue that we should now think beyond European philosopher, and we should think of our own version of international law, which I appreciate, but I think we all should make effort towards that, and gradually things will change. Now, then we had a presentation on role of international financial institution, and where Prateek and Akanksha, they deliberated upon IMF, and they talked about perhaps their idea was that maybe things are not in accordance with distributive justice and we need to make changes. This is debatable issue and lot more complex. But yes, one important viewpoint that was taken by them. Then Parveen Yadav gave his presentation regarding requirement of disclosure. And so what he highlighted was that at domestic level, though we have law to prevent biopiracy, but at international level, the checks and balances are not that good. And we need to do a lot in that field. And because, and what I could sense from his presentation was that he's trying to suggest that those who are powerful industrialized countries, perhaps they lack biodiversity, and perhaps not that industrialized country, that much industrialized country are biodiversity rich, and therefore this imbalance that favors industrialized country, and they allow them to exploit the resources from those countries where there is biodiversity rich, those who are biodiversity rich. So I appreciate his presentation. So overall, it was a very good experience, and I don't have anything to ask because of the time constraints, and because my learned colleague, Dr. Premchand, is waiting for his observation. So I'll end my deliberation here. And thank you so much to everyone for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Atul, and congratulations to all the participants. To me and all of you, I believe some of the new areas which are emerging and which are not the regular discussion in our classroom or the classroom teaching particularly, or not of the syllabus as well, or not of the of our tea party or a tea time discussion, it may not be. Like with all these, the earlier judges, my colleague, my chairperson, he will agree with me that right now we have thousands of papers or pages of of a decision, single decision. Earlier, Supreme Court, right, and other judges said, "I concur." Simply, I concur with my learned colleague, and that's over. And in this regard, as Professor Tiwari has given very elaborative remarks, and those questions which I do have in my mind and I have pointed out, it's taken already. So what I'll do, I can say two or 3 points particularly in regard to the Mr. Dinesh Singh, that is of land grab and farming, particularly globalization area. It's a well taken paper. It need more research and can be a good research in this area, particularly where India still is living in villages and based on farming, the economy particularly. Secondly, when we are talking, as my colleague, he observed simply one thing: if the foreign capital is coming in India, it also generate, economy. It also generate employment, and at the same time, the profits also be distributing amongst the people of India. No doubt, people are coming, or foreign companies or FDI or else, they are coming particularly to earn profit. But ultimately, at some point of time, we are also benefited. And this is the government, not the individuals who are grabbing, or not the MNCs who are grabbing. This is the state government or the central government who needs to take care of all these. And you can look into of all those areas where the loopholes are, and you can suggest, you can write a good paper on this, and this will be well accepted. Another is, this is Namit Srivastava. I congratulate to him. Well articulated and well written paper. And for the purpose of the Swati Singh Parmar, as she has given a new idea how to teach a paper, but with all respect, and as all of us, or maximum all of people from NLUs or this culture, I was a part of the traditional university. My learning and my teaching started from Delhi University. So at some point of time, the faculty and the professors, we focus on the principles, the basic concepts of the law. The philosophical aspect and the other aspect, critical aspect, this can be considered and discussed at the later classes, or later, say for the whole semesters of 3 months, 2 months, we can take the principles and basic understanding. Then the last month, we can be more critical and more philosophical and more, emphasize on these aspects. But we have to be very clear about the market as in relation to NLUs. The observation of law firms and the practitioners, as I said, the students are coming from NLUs are very smart, but they are lacking in principles. They are good in research, but when we are asking them the philosophy and principle, they are not doing good. So that aspect we have to be consider as a teacher. No doubt, we should go for the new areas, and we should think how to teach law, particularly in our classrooms. But at the same point of time, as a teacher, we should consider what market needs, what the students, we have to think about the stuff whom we are teaching. And thirdly, as we are aware about, these are the UGC and curriculum is being provided, and NLUs are free from their own aspect, and they can create their own syllabus, and they are not bound by, but as such we can take care of the paper, but syllabus we can carry on our own. So Praveen Yadav, Pratik Tripathi are right. So from all these aspects, thank you and congratulations to one and all these observations. There are certain questions, but as these will be considered by the participants, by the presenters in their final writing, and let's see if one or two paper if come to me for review, if the organizers think so, we will look into. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. A.K. Tiwari, sir. Thank you, Dr. Premchand, sir. Again, I'm a little bit short on words because when we have such legal stalwarts in front of us who have made such precise and to the point observation about papers, I am basically left with nothing to say more. So I congratulate all the participants. Thank you, our chairperson and our co-chairperson, for gracing and giving us your time to observe these participants, for giving your observation, your insightful perspective about things. And I congratulate almost everyone who has been a part of this whole seminar, of this wonderful session. It has been indeed a truly amazing experience for us, Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, National Law University, organizers, our whole team. We congratulate you, each and everyone. With that, I would like to end this session. Thank you, sir. Thank you, all the participants. Wish you all the very best and a very good day forward.
Thank you, everyone. I would just request all of you to stay for a minute, and if all the participants can just open their cameras for once, so we can have like a group picture in this virtual setting. Thank you, everyone. So I'll just click in 1, 2, and 3. Thank you all. This session was really insightful to even us, since we were hearing all of you, and we got really good insights on the theme. And so congratulations to all of you and all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you, everyone.